for customer acquisition and retention, hosted by Core Services and EMC. Just to start off, everyone is muted right now, and if you have any questions while we're going through the webinar, just go ahead and put it in the chat or in the question section, and I will pass those along to the presenters. And as for the presenters, today we have Mike Rolfe, Core Services CTO, and Mark Greenlaw, EMC Field CTO of Mid-Market East, and I am Josh Rothman, Marketing Manager here at Core Services, and I'll be the moderator. Mike, did you want to go ahead and get started?
Sure. Thanks, Josh. So for those of you out there, you've probably been noticing over the last decade or so, there's been a big increase in the amount of data that's out there. If you look at back in 2000, the world generated 2 exabytes of new information. But if you look at today, really we're generating that on a daily basis. The amount of data that increased is actually going up by 5 exabytes per day. So the rate of change and the addition of new information is growing significantly. And this is presenting a lot of challenges to organizations of how do they manage this and how do they take advantage of all this additional information to help them support and grow their business. Well, to look at some of the things that are behind this, you can see that there's been an explosion of data overall. People like Yahoo, Facebook, generating a lot of information, whether it's photos, whether it's email, but essentially there is a large amount of content that's bombarding businesses on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of this information they're not taking advantage of when trying to understand their customer base, how their products are being used, and what the general opinion that end users may have of the products that they're providing. And so the question becomes, how do I leverage all these this exploding data source, this additional data, to support what I'm doing in my business on a day-to-day basis, and maybe improve the relationship that I have with my customer, create better products, and overall help my business grow to meet the needs of the marketplace. So if we look at some of the challenges that are out there, one, as we've noticed, there's a lot of things that are happening out in general in growth of data, but even within existing corporate data, there's a large amount of change that's coming about. And data maybe that isn't being taken advantage of today. For example, if you're a manufacturing firm, you may be collecting a lot of information on your assembly line through sensors about what's happening on the shop floor, things that are happening through shipping, or if you're in the utility market, smart meters that are out there. All valuable information about what's happening in my business, but typically information that's coming at me at a high rate of speed. And how do I leverage and utilize that in my business? Second, I have a lot of good information about what my customers are doing that come through their web and e-commerce interaction with us. How do I understand sort of that click-through process that users are following when they're looking at my products? What products are they looking at? Why did they maybe select one product over another? Or why did they abandon their purchase for one reason or another? I can collect that information and potentially make better decisions, offer better pricing, or more targeted sales experience if I had visibility into what was that user experience customers had on the web. Another key place that I have a lot of data coming through may be through email, whether it's interaction with my support organization, survey responses, requests for information, but this is a prime way that users may interact with my business, that I'm purely treating that as a user-to-user experience. How do I take my business and allow it to look into that information and leverage that as part of my decision process? And even in a more real-time basis, chat and IM for those interactions. Or even, if I'm in the retail market, all the data that's coming through my point-of-sale system about what people buy, what things they buy together, or decisions they make of one product over another. When I combine this maybe with some demographic information, I can get a better view into what my customers are doing, whether it's commercial data that I'm picking up through Reuters, Hoovers, other types of commercial systems, or even just census data if I'm looking more to the individuals. I have a way that I can maybe correlate by the region you're from or what information about your region, why you're making purchasing decisions. And even from a broader standpoint, the prevalence of social media in today's market. There's lots of information out there on the web through Twitter, Facebook, and blogs where people are commenting about your products, good or bad. how do I understand what they're saying, which may not be through a direct interaction with me, so I can leverage sort of that community to figure out what's going on with my products. These are all challenges that organizations are trying to address today so that they can make better decisions above and beyond the traditional methods they may have out of their ERP or traditional data warehouse systems. Well, this data comes in a number of different guises. One is sort of the traditional structured data that most people are familiar with today. These are things that reside in an enterprise system like Oracle or SAP, where I have my financial data, my product and manufacturing data, Salesforce that's providing me CRM or sales information. It's got a nice structure to it. It's typically stored in a database, so I know all the fields. I know how the different objects relate to each other, so this is a nice structure that I can use to query and find the relationships of what's going on. At the other end of the spectrum is this unstructured data. A lot of this is produced by people, so it may be, Word documents that are being created and put out onto a storage solution, like a storage in the cloud. It may be web content coming through eBay, where I have a lot of posts and free format information that's being provided. All good information, but I really don't know the structure that this data resides in. And then in the middle, I have this semi-structured data. Think of it like XML. I know what the object is. I know something about what information is going to be in that object, but within those attributes, it's really free form, what the user can provide, and there isn't really a relationship between objects, things that are coming through social media. I know that there's a header saying who the person is. I know that there's content, which is the message they provide, but it doesn't really tie together. So these three different data all have unique challenges on how I collect, consume, and utilize that information to make decisions and present it in a way that drives to my business. So as I look at these new sources and all this volume, I have some traditional challenges that we've seen to collect and manage this data. One thing you often hear from an IT organization is, I just don't have enough space to collect all this information and analyze it. All that information is coming through from the shop floor, all the feeds that maybe are coming through Twitter or through other social media sources. These organizations are storage constrained, and while they can go out and buy additional storage, that cost of acquiring and the type of storage platforms they have today may make it difficult for them to do so, or make it not as cost effective to show the value to utilize it. These emerging sources that are creating a high volume. The second case that I have is the cost of infrastructure. So while I may be able to collect this information, it results in a multi-terabyte or even a multi-petabyte data warehouse, which means I need a very large set of servers to do the analysis on that information. Plus, and that comes with database licenses, other software costs that can drive up the cost of infrastructure to manage and report on and analyze that information, especially when I come to this third challenge where I have this rapidly changing content. Data warehouse structures tend to be fairly rigid. I have a definition of an object with a specific set of attributes that relate to another set of objects in a very clear way. As new content comes in, all these different emerging channels have different formats of how it may present the same information. So these new data sources may either require new data structures and relationships or modifications to my existing data structure to accommodate them. And I even have new problems, new questions that are coming in. Instead of the traditional, what have I done, what's been my sales volume, what's been my financial information, I start to get these what-if questions. What if I were to change my product structure or change the type of product I sell? What are the trends that I see emerging about my products? To answer these types of new questions may require restructuring of that existing data, which is a challenging affair for a business to perform. So if we look at it, the intersection of these challenges of volume, the rate that data comes in, or the amount of data comes in, velocity, the speed at which I receive it, and variety, the intersection of that is really where big data allows me to address these problems as a unique separation of analytic strategies from the traditional data warehouse model. So I need to be able to combine that new model of analyzing high volume, high velocity rapidly changing data with new processes to do that analysis of that data through data science. And most importantly, once I have that information and I analyze it, I need an analytic platform that allows me to present that information in a way that's actionable and relevant for my end users and management. If they can't use that data, if it isn't presented to them in a way that they can understand and consume, the data doesn't provide any value.
Thanks, Mike. That's really great information. But my question is this a solution that can be used for all companies or just the large ones?
So that's a good question. So if we look at this next chart, one of the things you'll see is while traditionally this has been leveraged by very large organizations, 63%, you're seeing small and mid-sized companies start to look to these tools, these analysis methods to make decisions on a greater and greater basis. And even, education, some of the public sector folks are getting an uptake on this as well. In fact, you've also seen that there's a wide variety of different industries that are consuming this. It's not just financial or retail businesses, but quite a large number of customers.
The question that comes to mind is how big is big when we start talking about big data? Sometimes people think that we have to talk in very large terms, petabytes and beyond, in order to say it's a big data problem. What's your experience, Mike, been with companies adopting big data and scale?
Well, we've started to see a lot of different industries evolving into this market. While it's traditionally been financial industries that have this large volume of data, you're starting to see, like we were pointing to earlier, manufacturing companies that are looking at sensor data and other methods to bring this in and collect the information, use it in their business.
So traditionally I'm seeing that sales and marketing use big data, but are there other areas of the company that big data analysis can be used for, Mike?
Sure. So if we go to the next slide, you've seen over the years, traditionally it was the CFO that was doing a lot of analysis. They were looking at, their data warehouse was built for them to analyze financial data. But now the CFO is starting to do a lot more in this space to do the what-if analysis. How can I better model my business? I have CIOs that are looking at all the different systems they have. They're trying to do log analytics. They're trying to do network analysis of what's going on within their business. Or you have COOs that are looking to do fraud detection and prevention in addition to the marketing folks.
Yeah, we also see that at EMC, our RSA division has noticed that there's been quite a bit of uptake with security and big data analytics. I think the best example of that recently was the Target breach, where they were breached for several weeks without necessarily knowing it. And a lot of our customers have asked us to not only monitor, but to automatically remediate that. And what are we monitoring? What we're monitoring is essentially millions of entries into our network, and we're looking to monitor what they're doing and then automatically assimilate the things that would be considered threats and escalating the ones that would be the most serious breaches for us to act upon, because there are so many to look at. So we look across the enterprise at all the different places, and we're collecting that information across the enterprise, no longer in silos. Just as a big data project eliminates the silos, essentially incorporates all the data across the enterprise, the same thing is true for risk analytics in security environments as well.
So if you were to look at this slide, that sort of drives to that same discussion. While in the past, and still even today, a large focus is on the marketing side for managing my customer relationship, you're seeing finance being budget and planning using a significantly high percentage, as well as operations. And these groups are sort of building up through this as we go.
Thanks, Mike. And this question is for Mark. We've seen the practicality of the solution. What would be a really good example of workable application of big data analysis?
Yeah, I've been doing big data discussions across a wide variety of enterprises, and I have a story I like to tell about two different interactions. One with a women's lingerie company in New Jersey, and a muffler shop, and realized that one spawned the other. So what ended up happening, I was at this lingerie provider, Maidenform, and they were looking at deploying what would be considered a traditional data warehouse analytics environment, and they were looking at internal data. And they were looking at their internal customers. Their internal customers were the department stores, retailers of their product, and they were saying, how are we going to sell more product next year? And when they looked at the scale of that problem, they didn't have a lot of customers, relatively speaking. There were, a very few number of department stores that they interacted with, and they had their list of products. So their database was going to scale to, about 250 gigabytes. And I asked them, I said, well, have you considered looking beyond the enterprise? What information beyond the enterprise might you be able to incorporate to help you entice people to use your products more? And I said, have you looked at, perhaps looking at social media like Facebook and looking for people who might be interested in new lingerie? And I said, you could ask Facebook for a listing of people who have public profiles where they're of type female aged 15 to 50 and have a change of relationship status. And instead of being an event, we'd be looking at that perhaps on a weekly basis to see what we're doing. And instead of using that for Maidenform to particularly target those individuals, they could use that information to, yes, they could individually target them with perhaps a coupon or some other enticement to come and buy those products at department stores. But they could get into a new business, which was one of the things that McKinsey found when they talked to CFOs and CEOs was, what do you want to do with big business, with big data? And that is a good 39% of the CEOs and CFOs want to get into new businesses. The new business for Maidenform, of course, would be to correlate those women by zip code that the stores were in. So now a department store like Macy's could say, okay, we can offer a Macy's coupon to come in and target these things, thereby customer acquisition becomes much more targeted for Macy's. And when I related that story in upstate New York to a group in upstate New York, a gentleman at Monroe Mufflers came back to me and said, Mark, I was absolutely intrigued by that story. I know in my heart of hearts that, in fact, we're spending too much money broadcasting coupons through the mail to an entire community that are within a zip code, what we consider reasonable driving distance to our muffler shops. He said, what I really want to do is I want to target the individuals that are recent college graduates aged 22 to 26. I know in my heart of hearts that they're graduating probably with debt and used older cars that need repair. So he said that story absolutely correlated. And what's interesting about that correlation is if you look at that and say, well, if there's a correlation, if somebody from Monroe Mufflers can come to the idea that they could do better because of what Maidenform thought about, then indeed this probably applies to a lot of businesses. And the real breaking ground here, Maidenform had to look outside their enterprise. Monroe Muffler had to look outside their enterprise. If they stay inward, then we're probably looking at that structured data, and when we look into what happened last year in our structured data, we're not getting all the insight that's possible. So that's really kind of some interesting things about how big data can transform businesses, and it's about getting those targeted customers in the shortest amount of time with the least cost with products that we think that that'll be appealing to them.
So I think going to the earlier slides, that speaks to that well, and how, while you have a larger company like Maidenform that obviously recognized the value, they were sort of in the people that had traditionally looked at this, somebody was able to look at that who was probably in more of a small to mid-market company and apply that to their business. And not only were they transitioning from that larger to small business, but you're also changing from very different market segments and seeing how that's uptaking across those.
Very good point.
So to the prior slide where we were talking about, and even in that example, it ties a lot with sort of the customer experience and how do I interact that customer experience. Maybe do you have another good example we could walk through of how we could how something like this would be used for an organization?
Sure. Let's go to the next slide and look at perhaps how grocery shopping might be viewed in a big data world, right? I grew up in a supermarket family. My father literally got his job on my birth, and he was a dairy clerk. And through my entire life, while he was working some 45 years, we basically lived this send and pray kind of approach where, every week the grocery store would have a circular. They would try to entice shoppers to come into the store with no more knowledge than perhaps what the competition was doing or what products might be popular, and try to have the best price and the best service, but we really didn't have any feedback. If we kind of go and look at maybe the way shopping would be in the future, you get all kinds of new information. First, in the new world, we have customer loyalty cards. And the great thing about customer loyalty cards is we now have information about our consumers, right? In this particular example, we have a picture of Jeremy Burton, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for EMC. He happens to be a Brit. These slides were that this use case was developed when the Olympics were in London, so perhaps Jeremy is very excited about them winning a gold medal that day, and because of that, of course, we want to target products that are towards what Jeremy might want in that environment. So we know Jeremy's walking into the store because he has his phone with him, and on his phone is his loyalty card number, right? He doesn't want to carry a whole bunch of these things. So if we click to the next slide, Jeremy walks into the store, and of course he's going to be buying some British biscuits because these are products that are going to be appealing to him, most appealing. And if I give him a discount while he's walking by the Hobnobs in the store, he's going to be far more likely to pick those up, and that's the impulse sale, right? He wasn't necessarily picking up that he was going to buy Hobnobs that day, but if you're going to give them to me for 20% off, well, I might just go for that splurge, right? And we go to the next example, and he's going to get some snacks to go with that. He's going to go down the snack aisle. We know he's in the snack aisle. We have a particular promotion from our favorite vendor, Lay's, and it says if you buy 3, you get 1 free. Now, normally people don't buy 4 bags of potato chips at once, but if you're going to give me 1 free, then I might actually not just buy 2, I might buy the 3rd to get the 4th. And of course, if you're going to buy a nice salty snack like a potato chip, what might go well with that? But, you know, a particular beer. And so while he's going down the beer aisle, I give him a promotion from the manufacturer that's going to give me that environment. And the truth of this is this targeted marketing is very much what big data is doing. And big data and retailers are using it in this fashion. There are retailers that are doing this today. And we have GPS information. There's our sensor information. We're getting information about where our shoppers are. We know about the loyalty of our, you know, we know what the attributes of that person are, perhaps with their loyalty card or some research we've done on them. And what we're now doing is we're targeting on what we're trying to promote in the store based on what they're doing. Furthermore, if you look at the next slide, we're also seeing that stores are taking, or retailers are taking an even greater step forward in big data, and they're looking at those wonderful screens that we see. They're actually monitoring your eyes and seeing what's appealing. That has 2 fundamental benefits to them. First off, they can see that if their end displays are appealing to you. What portion of the end display do you look at? That, of course, can be fed back to the manufacturers to say, you know, we had 3 products in that end display. Nobody looked at your product. We may want to change the packaging on that to make your product more appealing to shoppers. The other piece is if we find out that there are 3 products there and only 2 are being picked, we may not want to build that end display so we get better shopping penetration. But the truth of this is this monitoring and the sideways system that's demonstrated here, these are very real kinds of technology that help our customers find the products they're looking for and help the manufacturers make their products more appealing to those consumers. So it actually, again, from a big data perspective, it helps me sell more, but it also enables me to sell information back to the people who are providing me product and become an information service provider to them with some value back to them. After all, what are we really trying to do with big data and customer behavior? If we look at a traditional customer life cycle, we have customers, we spend money. So take the Monroe Muffler approach, right? We're sending out broadcast coupons across the community to try to get people to come in for oil changes, brake jobs, and mufflers. Fundamentally, that's what we do. And when we send those out there, we create circulars, we create coupons, and we mail them. That has cost, and it does. Those are not customers yet, so it's cost without return, so our value is negative. Then once we get a few of those customers, we get them, they come into the store, we're happy, they get the oil change, and then we monitor them. We don't monitor them necessarily as effectively as we'd like because over time perhaps they've had a bad experience in the store. And with that bad experience in the store, they start to wane as customers of ours. And how are we monitoring that? So are we following up with that visit from a customer service perspective? Did we see if they've gone back and looked for coupons on our website? What are we doing? Right? So the truth of it is what we're really trying to do with big data is we're trying to change that curve. We're trying to target those customers who would be very, very susceptible to our promotions. We're trying to get them to be customers faster. We're trying to cross-sell to them with more products. So you came in for an oil change. When might you need a brake job? You came in for a brake job. When might you need a muffler? And oh, by the way, you went into the muffler shop and you went back to our website afterwards. We're correlating your visit from a retail perspective at that store with a visit to our website, and we want to make sure that you are happy there and you don't go from our website to Meineke or to Midas, indicating that perhaps you've had a less than satisfying experience, and you remediate that before they leave. So if you detect that, you then send them a promotion from an email perspective, or reach out to them somehow so that you can retain them, thereby having the highest value relationship at the lowest cost.
Thanks for going through that, Mark. So Mike, we've heard a great example of how this can be used. How would someone get started with this strategy?
Sure. So one thing to point out here is really this is complementary to the services and to the analytics strategy you have today. So like we showed back in the earlier slide, there still is that structured data out there that's being used by your business intelligence systems today. You know, I still have a need for my standard and ad hoc reporting. I still need those dashboards about what's going on in my business now that looks at that structured data in those traditional sets to answer those questions like what happened last quarter, how much did I sell, what was my return on investment. But what data science and big data is doing is giving us an additional level of view into these customers. And so I'm not just have this backward-facing view that I have today through my traditional business intelligence systems, but big data and data science gives me that forward-looking view into my customer base. So looking at predictive analytics, answering questions about what if, you know, what's the best scenario, if I change certain variables, what is the potential change? So I'm leveraging these larger volumes of data to have a better analysis set to predict what's likely to happen in the future. And when I do this, I'm not just limiting myself to one source of information, but I'm actually now taking two different types of data, my backward-looking information of what's been done in my data warehouse. I'm feeding in information from these new sources via big data to give me an additional view, and I'm consolidating that into an analytics platform that then gives me a way to view what's happening in the business and and more accurately predict what's going to happen in the business so that I make a decision. And that's what CORE is recommending today, is we actually help you do this by offering these different components in a service-based model. So because as we were talking about some of the initial challenges or traditional challenges earlier, acquisition cost, cost of capital, to build these types of systems may be non-trivial, to explore a new model or a new method of doing analytics. So CORE has gone out, and we also provide the traditional data warehouse as a service for dealing with your structured data. We've partnered with EMC to offer big data as a service using a lot of the technologies that EMC brings to the table, whether it's Greenplum for Hadoop, Isilon for the storage platform, as well as some other management and monitoring tools that we've developed to give you a way to consume and utilize, start to use big data as part of your overall analytics strategy, along with an analytics platform, that front end, that takes those two sources of information, big data and traditional data warehouses, and presents it through an analytic view that end users can act on.
Thanks, Mike. And Mark, can you go into some of the technology that makes this possible from EMC?
Sure, that's a great question. You start looking at this and how would I get started in a big data environment? And the first thing we have to recognize is we're talking about structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. And most of the semi-structured and unstructured data is of type file. That is, they're unstructured web logs, or perhaps some things that are scanned in, some documents that are there, or other kinds of information that we're going to get of type file. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to store a massive amount of file. File growth outstrips traditional structured growth almost 4 to 1. So when we're doing that, we're not talking about a little bit of environment. And EMC has been on this big data kind of roadmap for the last 10 years. And one of the companies that we acquired to get us to an unstructured file storage arena is Isilon. And what Isilon does is Isilon stores files in what's called scale-out architecture. That scale-out architecture scales performance, capacity, and network bandwidth as you scale capacity. So as you're increasing the size of these anywhere from about 20 terabytes all the way to 20 petabytes, what you see is massive amount of scalability from a small start. But also we're scaling that in an environment where you get unmatched performance, all with, if you're thinking about how am I going to scale to 20 petabytes, If I'm going to build a petabyte file system, my approach might be fundamentally different than how I would do 10 terabytes. Right? So you need a different approach to this from a management perspective. You need a system that scales to an unprecedented level, and that was what was the impetus behind what EMC purchased with Isilon, a scale-out storage platform for big data. So if you look at what that is, Isilon in its environment is, by definition, a scale-out storage NAS environment. It's been in the marketplace for over a decade. We're on our 7th generation of the operating system, so it's very robust. We acquired them in 2010 for a little bit more than $2 billion. And its traditional marketplace had been in media, Web 2.0, and life sciences. What EMC has brought to the table is some robustness and introduction into our Fortune 500 accounts. And we now boast over 4,500 worldwide accounts for EMC Isilon infrastructure. So what do we have for the scale-out value? Clearly, we're beyond 15 petabytes. World record performance, 100 gigabytes a second of throughput at 1.6 million spec ops. Now, you can go to spec.org and get that number, but what's really important is you can get that kind of performance using traditional Linux approach of NFS, or if you want to get it from the Windows side, you can also get it from the Windows side using CIFS. One of the other unique characteristics is something we call unmatched efficiency. Traditional storage platforms that are multi-controller, what ends up happening is as you scale out, you become less efficient. Isilon is just the opposite. As I scale up, I become more efficient. Minimum efficiencies are traditionally in the 60 to 65% range, and we have customers that are multi-petabyte that are over 90%. So it is the expectation that you're going to get management simplicity, and where's the beef, I can actually use 80% of what I buy in a protected sense for actual use. We get with that all the enterprise data protection you'd expect to get from EMC with backup and recovery capabilities, disaster recovery, worm information, write once, read many times, snapshots and all that kind of things. We have multiple customers from a simplicity perspective. We have multiple 10 petabyte customers where it's not even a full-time job to manage 10 petabytes. So we have a great deal of simplicity. Also with the flexibility that is unique in the marketplace. We, of course, support NFS and SMB, the web protocols, HTTP and FTP, but now we also support Hadoop. Hadoop being we've actually support Hadoop as a protocol. So that enables us to cut your storage costs dramatically by using the data protection capabilities within Isilon, so you don't have to use Hadoop for making multiple copies, which is the traditional protection schema in Hadoop. But now we also have the flexibility of looking at the data that's contained within a Hadoop under traditional guise of Windows or Linux servers. They don't have to have multiple copies of that data for access to the information in our big data repository. The other thing that we're going to need, and this is another acquisition from EMC, if we're going to be looking across petabytes of data, and we're going to be looking across different types of data, we're going to have to do this in a different way. Right, the ingest and then the query time across all this information requires us to look at database acquisition, database in parallel. So MPP, massively parallel architecture for data analysis, allows us to add nodes in a scale-out architecture, and that gives us the ability to parallelize all of our access methods for ingesting the data as well as getting at the data. And it supports, the other thing you need is something that supports access to our traditional structured data as well as those semi-structured and unstructured data. And what that solution is really a combination of our Greenplum appliances sitting on top of an HDFS protocol Isilon environment to give us a scale-out storage environment for semi-structured and structured data, plus the access using Hadoop tools to look across all of our data and give us access to that information wherever it happens to come into our environment. And this is a unique solution from EMC where you have Greenplum and Hadoop combined to give us a comprehensive big data storage and analytics platform. Isilon being the scale-out enterprise-ready scale-out NAS platform. Greenplum gives us the complete offering for a Hadoop environment to look across those things, all with big data storage and analytic solutions.
Basically, what Mark has been explaining is the platform that Core Services has invested in to provide our big data as a service offering. So when you come to Core, you get access to all these technologies that Mark's been discussing to utilize as the basis for the big data component of your analytics strategy.
Gentlemen, thank you for going through those. At this time, I'm going to be opening it up to questions from the audience. If we have any, I'll address them. If not, I'd like to open up my contact information for anyone who is interested in getting a big data assessment from Core Services. Again, my name is Josh Rothman, Core Services Marketing Manager. You can reach me at jrothman@Core Services. The phone number is there. And of course, any other questions you may have for Mike or Mark, visit our website, our social networking sites. And we thank you for attending. And I will be leaving the broadcast open in case a question comes up. Please feel free to stay. If not, we thank you again and hope you have a nice day. If you have any questions for our panelists, please put it through to the chat or the questions log so we can address them in an orderly fashion.